was happening inside the house. They've had full access to that house. We saw the blood on the doorstep. Well, there's been no details provided to the public over what they found when they got inside. What did the bed look like? What did it look like? There was signs of struggle. We don't have any detail from inside the home.
1:47 in the morning. That is the moment everything changed. No storm. No sirens. No warning. Just a quiet residential street in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona, where the air was still and the neighborhood was asleep, and an 84-year-old woman was inside her home, the same home she had lived in for 5 decades, the same home where she had raised her children, tended her garden, and built the quiet, dignified life she had always chosen. And then 1:47 arrived. Something happened in those minutes that the cameras could not capture, that no neighbor saw, that no phone recorded. Something that unfolded in complete darkness, in complete silence, with no witnesses and no trace that the human eye could follow. But something was watching. Something inside Nancy Guthrie's own chest was recording every single second of what happened to her that night. Not a camera. Not a phone. A device the size of a small matchbox, implanted beneath her skin, clicking away in the dark, logging data with a precision that no human witness could ever match. And for months, the FBI has been sitting with what that device recorded. For months, the full picture has lived inside a federal evidence file, analyzed by forensic cardiac specialists, reviewed by some of the most credentialed investigators in the country, decoded piece by piece until the sequence of events from 1:47 to 2:28 in the morning of February 1st, 2026, became undeniable. The question was never whether the data existed. The question was what it meant. And when the FBI's forensic team finally understood what the pacemaker's data was telling them, they did not go home. They kept working. Through the night. Because what they were looking at inside that evidence file was not a mystery. It was a map. A physiological map of exactly what happened to Nancy Guthrie in those 41 minutes of complete external darkness. Hi viewers, here is a question and the answer might surprise you. Did you know that a pacemaker could record evidence of a crime? Comment below, yes or no. That map starts with a name.
Where I would start at is, and it actually came from John's demonstration yesterday on the pacemaker in the app. I want to know at the last time that the app successfully pinged, did it show, what kind of data does it show? Does it show that Nancy was functioning normally, her heart was normal, or does it show that she was an extremist? Was her heart elevated? That starts giving you a window when things started happening between the time the camera triggered and it gets in there.
Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, the longtime anchor of NBC's Today Show, a face that millions of Americans wake up to every single morning. She is the mother of Annie Guthrie, who lives approximately 4 miles from Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills. Nancy is not a public figure. She never sought to be. She was a woman who raised her 3 children largely on her own after losing her husband suddenly in 1988, a loss that would have broken many people but did not break her. She was the kind of woman who knew her neighbors by name. The kind of woman who showed up to church on Sunday and meant it. The kind of woman who spent quiet evenings on her porch watching the Tucson sky do what the Tucson sky does best, which is burn gold and then go dark and then fill up with stars. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Nancy had dinner with her daughter Annie. It was an ordinary evening. The kind of evening that families have hundreds of times and never think to remember because there is no reason to. Tommaso drove her home afterward. She went inside. And at 1:47 in the morning, the world she had built over 84 years was shattered.
It was at 2:12 a.m. that the software detected a person on camera. That's sort of vague because we know she didn't pay for a subscription. The police said there's no video available. So whatever it is that the camera does, it somehow identified movement on the camera and identified that as a person and shot that over as an update coming from the camera.
Nancy Guthrie has now been missing for more than 90 days. Let that settle for a moment. 90 days. An 84-year-old woman. Gone. And the most complete record of what happened to her that night is not sitting in a police report or a witness statement. It is stored inside a device that is still implanted in her chest, still running, still counting every heartbeat, wherever she is right now. The FBI decoded the data from that device. They decoded it at night. They decoded it urgently. And what they found did not just change the direction of this investigation. It changed everything. Because the pacemaker inside Nancy Guthrie's chest did not just keep her heart beating. It recorded her fear. It recorded the moment she was taken. It recorded something in the final minutes before the signal went silent that tells investigators exactly what kind of person is responsible for this, exactly what level of planning went into it, and exactly why the FBI has been using a word to describe this case that federal investigators do not use lightly. Stay with this. Because by the time the full picture is laid out, the timeline, the cardiac data, the accelerometer readings, the forensic findings, the profiler conclusions, and the one clinical detail buried in the final 10 minutes of that 41-minute window, understanding what happened to Nancy Guthrie on the night of February 1st, 2026, will not be something that can be walked back. The data does not lie. And Nancy's own heart told the truth. Most people think they know what a pacemaker does. They think it is a heart regulator. A small device that sends electrical pulses to keep a heart beating in rhythm. And yes, that is part of what it does. But that is only half the story. And in the case of Nancy Guthrie, the half that most people do not know about is the half that changed everything. Modern implanted cardiac devices are not just regulators. They are recorders. Every single heartbeat logged. Every arrhythmia captured with a timestamp. Every time the heart rate climbs above its normal range, logged. Every time it drops below, logged. Every significant physiological shift the body moves through, captured, stored, and in many cases transmitted in real time to a remote monitoring system that never sleeps and never looks away. Think about what that means. It means Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker was not just keeping her alive. It was keeping a record. A precise, time-stamped, medically verified record of every physiological change her body experienced. Not once a day. Continuously. Every beat. Every shift. Every moment. And beyond the cardiac data, Nancy's device contained something else. Something that most people do not know modern pacemakers carry. An accelerometer. A motion sensor capable of detecting physical movement and reading the specific character of that movement. Whether a person is walking voluntarily, moving under their own power, their body generating its own momentum, or whether a person is being moved by someone else, passive, not self-directed, carried. The accelerometer knows the difference. And it records what it finds. Nancy's pacemaker was also connected to a home monitoring base unit sitting in her bedroom, plugged into the wall, transmitting her cardiac data to the device manufacturer's secure cloud platform on a continuous basis. Not a weekly upload. Not a daily summary. A continuous, rolling transmission of everything the device inside her chest was recording. That cloud record is what the FBI subpoenaed in the first week of February 2026. The manufacturer complied immediately. And when the FBI's forensic cardiac specialists opened that file and began working through what it contained, they did not find gaps. They did not find corrupted data or missing timestamps. They found a complete, unbroken physiological record of everything Nancy Guthrie's body experienced between 1:47 and 2:28 in the morning of February 1st, 2026. 41 minutes. Every second of it recorded. The home monitoring unit in Nancy's bedroom had been syncing with her pacemaker the way it always did, quietly, automatically, invisibly, right up until the moment the connection broke at 2:28. And in those 41 minutes between the camera going dark and the sync going silent, while the outside world saw nothing, while no neighbor stirred and no passing car slowed down and no human eye recorded a single frame of what was happening inside that house, the device beneath Nancy Guthrie's skin was watching. Logging. Storing. Waiting for someone to read it. The FBI read it. And what they found inside that 41-minute window is laid out in 5 evidence points that, when placed side by side in sequence, form a picture that cannot be argued with. This is not interpretation. This is not speculation. This is physiological data recorded in real time by a medical device that had no agenda, no fear, and no reason to lie. Now comes the part that changes everything. At 1:46 and 58 seconds in the morning, the front door sensor at Nancy's home detected motion on the property.
And then I did a quick analysis. I looked at the location and I did an egress analysis to say, if I wanted to get more than 5 miles away outside a 5-mile radius, how many major routes are those? And there are 5 major routes, dozens of ways inside each route, but there's 5 major routes.
For seconds later, at 1:47 and 2 seconds, the doorbell camera began recording. 13 seconds after that, at 1:47 and 15 seconds, an unknown figure appeared on camera. The figure was dressed entirely in black. Slim build. Athletic. Gloved hands. 2 bags. Moving with the kind of deliberate calm that does not belong to someone who wandered onto the wrong property by accident. 3 seconds later, at 1:47 and 18 seconds, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker logged a sudden and dramatic spike in her heart rate. 3 seconds. The figure appeared on camera at 1:47 and 15. Nancy's heart spiked at 1:47 and 18. Those 2 data points are not a coincidence. They are the same moment, captured by 2 completely separate recording systems, one external and one internal, both timestamped, both permanent, both telling the exact same story. Something happened at 1:47. And Nancy's own body confirmed it. By 1:47 and 50 seconds, the figure had moved out of the camera's frame. The camera was disabled. The footage went dark. And from that moment forward, there was no external record of anything that happened at that property. No camera. No phone. No GPS signal. Only the pacemaker. Only the device inside Nancy's chest, still running, still logging, still recording every beat of a heart that was now deep inside a 41-minute window that the rest of the world could not see into. Phase 1 of what that data reveals is this. Nancy was awake. This is not a small detail. This is one of the most significant findings in the entire case. The cardiac spike at 1:47 is not the slow, gradual rise of someone waking from deep sleep. It is not the gentle climb of a person stirring, sitting up, reaching for a glass of water. It is acute, sudden, vertical on the data graph. Forensic cardiologists who have reviewed this type of cardiac pattern describe it in consistent terms. It is the physiological response of a person who is conscious, alert, and suddenly confronted with something that triggers an immediate fear response. She was not asleep when this began. She was awake. She was aware. And at the exact moment that masked figure disabled her front door camera, her heart told the truth about what she already knew was happening. Phase 2 is where the data becomes harder to sit with. The spike at 1:47 does not come back down. In a standard startle response, the body's alarm system fires, the heart rate climbs, and within a few minutes, once the brain registers that the threat has passed, the rate returns to its baseline. That is normal human physiology. That is what happens when someone hears a loud noise, looks around, finds nothing, and settles back into the quiet of an ordinary night. That is not what the data shows here. Nancy's heart rate remained elevated. The rhythm shows irregularities consistent with sustained and extreme emotional distress. Not a cardiac emergency. But not calm. Not safe. Not the body of a woman who heard something, checked, found nothing, and went back to sleep. This is the physiological signature of a person who remained in the presence of a threat. A threat that did not leave. A threat that stayed. For an extended period of time, Nancy Guthrie's body was in a state of acute and sustained fear. The device inside her chest recorded every second of it. And then, approximately 15 to 20 minutes into that 41-minute window, the data changed again. This is the finding that investigators have been most careful about discussing publicly. And it is the finding that, once understood, makes the picture inside this case file impossible to look away from. The accelerometer data shifted. Up to this point in the window, the movement data from Nancy's pacemaker showed the kind of irregular, self-generated motion consistent with a person moving through their own home under their own power. Agitated movement. Reactive movement. The motion of a conscious person responding to a situation unfolding around them. But approximately 15 to 20 minutes in, that changed entirely. The movement became passive. Not Nancy walking. Not Nancy moving from room to room under her own direction. The accelerometer was now reading something different. The movement was external. Continuous. Sustained. Not generated by the person wearing the device but transmitted through them from an outside source. The specific rhythm and character of that movement, its sustained nature, its consistency, its duration, is what forensic specialists describe as compatible with one particular scenario. Being placed in a vehicle and driven away. Let that land for a moment. The accelerometer inside Nancy Guthrie's chest recorded the moment she was put into a vehicle. Not a camera. Not a witness. Not a passing car that happened to catch something on a dashcam. The device implanted in her own body captured the moment she left her home. That data is sitting in an FBI evidence file right now. It has been there since February. And it means that the question of whether Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home that night is not a question at all. Her own body answered it. Now comes the most disturbing finding in this entire case. In the final 10 to 15 minutes before the sync stops at 2:28 in the morning, the data shows something that the FBI's forensic cardiac team has described as the most clinically significant finding in the entire analysis. The heart rate, which had been elevated throughout the majority of that 41-minute window, begins to change. Not a spike. Not a crash. A very specific, measurable, medically recognizable shift in a metric called heart rate variability. The natural beat-to-beat fluctuation that a conscious, functioning heart maintains. The rhythm that reflects the central nervous system's ongoing influence over cardiac function. That variability began to decrease. Significantly. Decreased heart rate variability in this clinical context has a precise meaning. It is the pattern a heart produces when the normal regulatory signals from the brain are being suppressed. When awareness is being altered. When a person's consciousness is being chemically affected by a substance introduced into their body. The clinical term for what the pacemaker data shows in those final minutes is pharmacological sedation. Someone administered a sedating substance to Nancy Guthrie. In a vehicle. In the dark. In the early hours of February 1st, 2026. An 84-year-old woman was given something that altered her consciousness, and the device inside her chest recorded the exact physiological moment it took effect. This finding does not exist in a vacuum. It carries investigative weight that reshapes every other piece of evidence in this case. First, it confirms premeditation at a level that eliminates any possibility of this being unplanned. Medical-grade sedating compounds that produce this type of rapid-onset cardiac signature are not something a person stumbles into. They are acquired. They are transported. They are brought to a location with specific and deliberate intent. Someone researched this. Someone obtained it. Someone carried it to the Catalina foothills in the early hours of a February morning and used it on a woman in her 80s while the rest of the neighborhood slept. That is not impulse. That is planning. Second, it means there is a procurement trail. Controlled substances that produce this class of cardiac signature are not available over a pharmacy counter. They require a prescription history, a clinical connection, a hospital-adjacent source, or a black market pathway that itself leaves traces. Either direction leads somewhere. And the FBI is following that trail right now. Third, and perhaps most investigatively powerful, the specific cardiac signature visible in the data narrows the range of compounds that could have produced it. Narrowing the compound narrows the list of people who could have obtained it. And narrowing that list brings investigators meaningfully closer to a name. Now, the DNA. Because it connects to the pacemaker findings in a way that most public reporting has not fully explained. the FBI confirmed that biological evidence recovered from Nancy's home was sent to the laboratory at Quantico, Virginia. A rootless hair sample and biological material recovered from a bedsheet at the scene. Rootless hair is notoriously resistant to traditional DNA analysis. But the FBI partnered with Astria Forensics, a California-based laboratory that specializes in low copy number and touch DNA analysis. Forensic genetic genealogist C.C. Moore is involved in the processing. C.C. Moore has personally cracked cases that sat cold for decades using nothing more than degraded biological material and the science of probabilistic genotyping. The CODIS search, the National Criminal DNA Database, came back negative. No match. No prior record. No arrests. No convictions. Whoever left biological material inside Nancy Guthrie's home has never been processed into any criminal database in the United States. That single result eliminates an enormous category of suspect. It does not describe someone with a criminal history. It describes someone who, on paper, appears completely ordinary. Someone who moves through daily life without drawing attention. Someone who could attend a family gathering and smile across the table and give no indication whatsoever of what they are capable of. That detail is not reassuring. It is the opposite. 3 of the most credentialed criminal profilers in the country, Docter and Burgess, whose foundational work with the FBI helped shape the Netflix series Mindhunter, Dr. Gary B. Cato of Boston College, and criminologist Dr. Casey Jordan, all arrived at the same conclusion independently, without coordinating with each other. The figure at the front door was not running this operation. He was the front. The visible piece. The person sent to the door while the one who planned every detail, who obtained the sedatives, who knew the camera system, who knew the neighborhood, who knew enough about Nancy Guthrie's life to design an operation this precise, stayed completely invisible. Someone with a connection. Someone with resources. Someone who knew. And if that person has already removed the figure at the door to protect themselves, then investigators are not looking at a single crime. They are looking at someone who built an exit strategy before the operation even began. FBI Director Kash Patel used a specific word when discussing this case. Nefarious. Federal investigators do not reach for that word casually. When Kash Patel says nefarious, when he says that appropriate arrests will follow if nefarious conduct or conspiracy is confirmed, that is not a vague statement. That is a signal. And people who understand how federal investigations communicate publicly know exactly what that signal means. Now, the TMZ notes, because the pacemaker data does something very specific to the claims made in those notes. On April 6, 65 days into the investigation, someone sent 2 notes to TMZ. The first claimed Nancy was no longer alive. The second, sent the same morning by the same person, claimed she had been seen alive in Sonora, Mexico. 2 notes. Same sender. Same morning. Directly contradicting each other. Retired FBI agents called them fraudulent immediately. But here is what makes them even less credible than most people have been told. The pacemaker data at 2:28 in the morning does not show what would be expected if Nancy had not survived. It does not show the device entering any kind of post-event mode. It shows a sedated but functioning heart. Still beating. Still regulated. Still alive. Whoever wrote that first note was not working from knowledge of what the pacemaker actually recorded. They had no access to the FBI's forensic cardiac analysis. They were guessing. And their guess directly contradicts the most medically precise evidence in this entire investigation. Which brings everything to the question that matters most right now. Where is Nancy Guthrie? The accelerometer data from the vehicle movement phase gave investigators a geographic constraint to work from. If the connection between Nancy's pacemaker and her home monitoring unit broke at 2:28, and the vehicle had been moving for approximately 15 to 20 minutes before that moment, then at the point of disconnection, Nancy was somewhere between 12 and 25 miles from her home in the Catalina foothills. That radius, overlaid on a map of Tucson and the surrounding region, places a highway corridor heading south directly within it. Toward Rio Rico, toward the border. Investigators know that, and they did not consider it a coincidence. The FBI deployed signal detection equipment, devices that use amplified directional antennas to search for specific Bluetooth signals, to search for the unique MAC address broadcast by Nancy's specific pacemaker. That equipment was mounted on a helicopter flying slow and low over the search corridor. The signal range of a pacemaker Bluetooth transmission under ideal conditions is approximately 15 to 30 feet. That is a short distance. It requires being in the right area and within that narrow range of where Nancy physically is. That search is ongoing. There were mistakes made in this investigation, and they deserve to be named honestly. Biological evidence was initially routed to a state-level laboratory in Florida rather than directly to Quantico, even though FBI Director Kash Patel had a fixed-wing aircraft on standby that same night to move it. That delay cost weeks in a case where weeks matter enormously. Jurisdictional friction between the Pima County Sheriff's Office and the FBI created confusion at the precise moment when coordination was most critical. A sitting county official publicly accused Sheriff Nanos of allowing a personal conflict with the FBI to interfere with a federal investigation. That accusation has not been retracted. And specific details about the Bluetooth detection effort were disclosed publicly in ways that may have communicated to whoever is holding Nancy exactly what steps to take to avoid detection. Each of those mistakes, in isolation, has an explanation. Together, they describe a case that should have moved faster than it has. But here is what has not slowed down. The DNA is at Quantico. C.C. Moore and Astria Forensics are running it through probabilistic genotyping and forensic genetic genealogy. That technology, when applied to quality biological evidence, has never permanently failed to produce a result. When it finds something, it holds up. It goes to court. It produces outcomes. The procurement trail for the sedating compound identified in the cardiac data is an active investigative thread. Every compound ruled out narrows the field. Every source eliminated brings the investigation closer to the source that cannot be eliminated. And the person who planned this, who knew the camera system, who had the vehicle ready, who obtained a controlled substance and transported it to a quiet street in the Catalina foothills in the early hours of a February morning, that person is the central target of a federal investigation that is not finished. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker has 6 to 7 years of battery life remaining. It has been running continuously since the night she disappeared. Every day. Every hour. Every minute. The internal memory of that device holds a complete physiological record of everything Nancy has experienced since 2:28 on February 1, 2026. Every moment her body has moved through. Every physiological change. Every shift. The whole truth of those 90-plus days is stored inside a device the size of a small matchbox, inside a woman who raised her children alone after losing her husband, who tended her garden, who attended church, who had dinner with her daughter and went home. Her heart is still beating. The device inside her chest is still keeping count. And every investigative thread currently active in this case, the DNA at Quantico, the Bluetooth detection sweeps, the procurement trail for the sedating compound, the forensic genealogy work that C.C. Moore is running, all of it is moving toward the same point. A name. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, the Pima County Sheriff's Department can be reached at 520-351-4900. The FBI can be contacted directly. The reward in this case currently stands at $1,200,000. The pacemaker data gave investigators the timeline. It told them she was awake. It told them she was afraid. It told them she was moved. It told them she was sedated. It told them her heart was still beating at 2:28 in the morning. The next video covers something that has not been discussed publicly in any of the coverage of this case. There is a name that keeps appearing at the edges of this investigation. A connection that forensic genealogists and federal profilers have been quietly circling for weeks. A detail buried inside the procurement trail for the sedating compound that points not to a stranger, but to someone far closer than anyone has said out loud. If you are following this case, that next video is not one you can afford to miss. Because the data led somewhere. And where it led will change the way this entire story looks from the beginning.